Welcome back to Silent Sales Machine Radio. I am your host, Brian Olson, today, and this is Coach's Corner. Today, I'm sitting down with someone I've been really looking forward to talking to. This is Mike Alte. Mike's an Amazon seller, a coach, and someone who's built a serious amount of momentum here after starting from zero in a very uncomfortable spot. He's got a great story, and he's not shy about the hard stuff, setbacks, rebuilding, kind of what it takes to stay in the game. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I really have been looking forward to having you on the show. We talked about this, I think, back at the conference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things I really appreciated, I got a chance to go to your session. I was there for the bulk of it. I kind of missed the beginning and maybe just the tail end. But one of the things I appreciated about the session that you did at this year's Proven Conference is just kind of how open and honest you were, laying it all out there. The trials, the tribulations, the successes, all of that. I think it makes you highly relatable. And that's one of the reasons I'm really been looking forward to doing this interview.
Let's get started.
Okay, good. That's my line. Let's get into it. So I'm just going to jump right into the heart of this, right? Because I can relate so much to this, just in terms of we're about the same age. I think I'm a little bit older than you, but in your 50s, you lost your job. I mean, what is going through your head when you realize that you had to figure something else out?
There was a lot of frustration, a lot of despair. I never imagined it'd be that hard to find another job, just from sounds prideful or whatever, but the resume didn't look that bad. The education looks pretty good. The experience looks pretty good. And I never dreamed it would be as hard to find another job. And so after applying to job after job after job and not even getting an opportunity for a phone interview, it's like, okay, well, what's next? And, I considered all sorts of things. Early in my life, I did construction as part of a family. I had family that was in construction and considered this business, looked at it a little bit with a brother-in-law who's in the business, and ran into Jim somewhat by happenstance and was talking to him because I knew him from years before and said, tell me more about this. But, I was just at that point of, I have to do something to provide for my family. And what is that going to be? And, the first few weeks, I wasn't exactly sure, but it's like, I've got to make a solid effort. And, per se, nothing in life has ever been easy. You had to work for it. And so let's give it all I have and make the best of it. And, that's what I did. I jumped in with both feet because failure wasn't an option.
I love that. I love that saying, failure is not an option. I think you have to treat it this way, at least for a certain amount of time, if you're really going to find success here. And you remind me a little bit of Grant Douglas's story, where I think he's a little younger than us, but he was the same way. I'm not sure that he lost a job, but jumping in with both feet, trying to figure out how to make this work. Started with a relatively small amount of money and scaled up pretty quickly. And you did the same. Like, I think you ramped up pretty quickly in those first few months. What exactly were you able to do to make that happen?
The first few months, I started to say weeks, but it was months, many months, I was sourcing 14 hours a day. The first thing I really kind of hit with me and stuck with me and made a difference. I mean, we tried sourcing in the store and, I came home and told my wife, I'm thinking about this. And you know what, I think we're going to give it a try. And she thought I was still in that, debating phase. And I was doing some remodel work and I came back from the remodeling and said, well, I signed up for coaching. I signed up for the course. We have a business. We're going. And she said, okay. And we went to do store sourcing at Sam's Club. And we tried typing in because, you're not supposed to scan. So we typed in titles. She took one side of the big aisle. I took the other side of the big aisle. And I turned around and looked at the look on her face. I still remember, was just like utter dismay, because it was not, we were in there for a couple of hours and, you're fighting bad cell phone reception and slow response and all these things. And so we walked away with a few things to try, but they were questionable, even looking back. And even at the time, you knew they were questionable. You're like, you got to do something. And so we tried a few items that didn't work very well at that point. But the first thing that really kind of hit home with me personally was storefront stalking. Mm-hmm. And that's where I really started to dig in and at least find some success finding results. My wife, Kelly, was really good at, still is more this RA type of items, but it was going through that list or a picture and typing them in. And she's phenomenal at finding results that way. But the storefront stalking and watching your first video there, advanced Keepa training many times to go through the details of how to find those items off of Keepa.
Yeah, that's awesome. That I think is like the most beneficial way to this day. I just was doing coaching last night and I'm telling someone the most fruitful leads that I get are from, I call it retail recon, right? The bulk
Right.
retail recon approach, because I just don't know what the magic there is, but it's magic
Yeah.
and it works. It helps. It's like the fast start button, right? The quick
Right.
start. Well, I said that, you ramped up pretty quickly and we, you said it was the first, few months, many months, whatever. Any mistakes in those early days that kind of stand out to you today that you're like, yeah, I make sure that that's never going to happen to me again. And I, everyone I tell, every time I get a chance, I tell people the same thing.
It's, you go through it some in the courses that you teach, but the making sure the asen matches. Is the brand good? Do the bullets, the pictures, and the title make sense? And was so desperate to find something that works. I can remember finding some of them. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't. It's confusing, but I think that I can sell a 1-pack here, and I don't know if it's a 1-pack or a 3-pack, but the details all point really to the 1-pack, even though it's priced as a 3-pack. Man, I can make money, and this will be good. And then you start getting the returns, and you're like, and this is why the experienced sellers you say you just stay away from those. Um, but it's really the basic items that they teach over and over again. But sometimes you have to learn by touching that fire and saying, oh, that is hot. That's why they tell us not to do that.
Don't touch that. It's hot.
Right.
Yeah.
Making sure the sources are good. As I was training VAs, they do a lot of the sourcing now, but that was one that you're like, no, the source has to be good. What does that mean? And going through that, but just really making sure that it's a clear, good ASIN that matches up. It was some of my first real like, ouch, that one didn't work very well.
Yeah, those returns, they do sting a little bit.
Yeah.
And when you're new, you don't even realize what's going on sometimes. Like I remember one thing that we were selling in the early days, it was a hamster or gerbil food or something. And we didn't realize that there were multiple flavors and everyone kept returning the product. And we're like, but it's a perfect match.
Right.
Then we eventually realized, oh no, we were supposed to be sitting in the cheese flavor, not the regular flavor.
Right. Yeah. Some of the variations are very minute. I sold some yarn for a while, and when I ordered it, I thought everything, and I looked at it multiple times, thought everything matched. And then you start getting into all the nuances.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of nuances on that same color, same brand, same size. So we're still slowly processing through that from 18 months ago. I'm sitting here on the desk. My wife's desk is next to me. She has some yarn she's been working on for eBay. So
you got to have those outlets. Yeah.
you're right.
Well, one of the things I really appreciated about your live session at the conference this year was you talked a little bit about how you were like, oh, I don't need the mindset stuff, right?
Right.
You said they used to skip the mindset sessions, but what made you change your view on that?
There's just been several times where you got hit and things taken out, and makes you stop and think back because you feel like you're getting momentum. You're like, okay, I'm thinking, getting the hang of this. It's starting to click, making progress. Sales are going up, profits going up. All right, I'm on a journey. It's still a lot of work, but I'm getting there. And then something happens, and you feel defeated there when you get those results back. My first big product was some ghee butter, and made good money on it. Sold fast, and we sold it for months. And then the listing changed, and all of a sudden, no longer did what I was selling match the listing, and started getting all those returns. And then I had to pull all the inventory back. And so there's been several of those along the way, and you feel defeated, and you're like, all right, is this really worth it or not? Can I really do this? But having to come back and just take a hard look at it and say, any business, anything you're out there, it takes work, and it takes a lot of readjusting.
So what are you saying to yourself, or where do you go in your mind when something, feels like you just got hit upside the head with a 2x4, 5 years from now, it's going to be barely a speed bump, but
Right.
where do you go with yourself to sort of overcome?
I usually will walk away for I say a little while. It's like, take a walk around the block, take an hour break, look at it. I heard one point, a podcast or something I was listening to, and it was like, the people who are least likely to make it, one of the things they said was somebody with golden handcuffs. If you got a really good job, it's easier when that blow comes, just go, forget it, I'll walk away. Man, it's a little more work than I thought. Never mind. But when you don't have a job and you've decided, you're going to try to feed your family off of this, all right, failure is not an option. Now I got to go back and adjust and say, what can I do to recover? Well, how did I find that last ASIN that sold really well for multiple months?
Yep.
All right, let's do that again. And we got to keep going.
Yeah. Find a way to repeat the successes, right?
Right.
Well, it talked about maybe something that was a in the rear view mirror, it's a speed bump, even though it hurts kind of a bit when you're going over it. But far more impactful was when the bundling process changed
Yeah.
back in 2024. And I know you lost a good chunk of revenue. We talked about this at one back at the Legends conference. We walked away for lunch a little bit and had a conversation a little bit about this, but we didn't get too deep into it. But how did you keep your head straight in that scenario?
Great question. Sometimes I still wonder. I lost about 50% of my revenue from that October to about February was kind of my low point. That all the news started coming out in October and started pulling inventory back and closing the listings that were the least bit questionable. And so I lost easily 50% of revenue and therefore profits. And so that was a hard blow to take a step back from and say, okay. And for a long time, I mean, as we had looked and thought, it's often easier to sell a bundle profitably or a multi-pack profitably than as a single unit. And so, it's kind of that whole restructure. What are we looking for now and how do we recover from that? And so I had just pivoted to kind of wholesale at that time and had the VAs doing a lot of the replens business. And so I was spending time starting to develop relationships with distributors and so forth. I just had to put that on hold and say, no, I've got to build that foundation back up. Replens is where I've kind of built a stable foundation from. That's where the base money's coming from. And so I put wholesale on hold there for a few months. And I went back to 14 hours a day of sourcing and said, all right, I've just got to dig in and rebuild here. What's this look like?
Just huge kudos for being able to go back to, it wasn't square one because,
Right.
it was half your revenue, but still it's a major blow. So
Right.
I'm just curious, like that 14 hours a day when you're doing that, did you have a sense of like for every day or for every hour that I'm sourcing, I'm usually, I'm replacing or finding this many testable asens or, asens to send in?
During that time frame, when I started to go back and, I was trying, I think, for 10 asens a week when I was just early on because I had really aggressive goals of how quickly I wanted to build the business. And there during that time frame, we were typically testing about 30 asens a week.
Wow.
As I was doing 14 hours a day, the VAs had, I basically just had a meeting with them and said, well, here's where we're at. I'm in this for the long haul, but it's time to dig in and we've got to, work together and get this done. And so, I was sourcing like crazy and my wife was sourcing some. And although during that time she was still homeschooling and working, doing some things like that kept her busy as well. We were sending in 25 to 30 test asens a week for several months there as we were trying to rebuild our refunds business. As you go, you are able to source quicker, as you know, and make those decisions on what that, nope, not that one. Nope, not that one.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I'll spend a little more time on this one because this one has possibilities.
How did that compare to the first time when you were ramping up? How many asens were you testing each week in the very early days?
Very early days, my target was 5, but after I told my coach what my goals were, my short comment was something like, well, at least you have goals, which politely told me I was nuts. And so she sent me on more like, if you want to hit that goal, you're going to have to find 10 to 15 asens a week. And I was averaging probably about 10 a week. And so, but I got a little more efficient at sometimes it's filtering and eliminating what's most likely not to work with the keeper results if you're doing recon. And sometimes it is just digging in and working hard and getting it done. But you're able to rule out those that don't work a lot faster because you recognize the misbrand or the title or something else very quickly and just close it out and move on.
That was one of the questions I had. I was going to ask you a little bit later, but since we're here, you said that you can rule out, at one point, you said that you can rule out 90% of asens in like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
What is your thought process that people
So if I'm
take
doing
away from this?
storefront stalking, get the Keepa list, I usually will download Keepa into Excel, which is where I feel like a huge chunk of my earlier life in Excel. And I put in a link that will basically a hyperlink from the asen directly into the Amazon page. And then I open up 20 Amazon pages of like the first 20 listings, go let them load. And then I start on the right-hand side, click the asen, search it in the title in Google and Google Shopping. And I already know quickly what price am I looking at to be profitable. And if I don't see that on the first page or two of Google Shopping, I just close that one and move to the next one. And with multiple screens up, I can cut and paste and move through Google pretty fast. And if it's not close, if it's close, then I go back and I start looking for, is it didn't have to be 30% today, but then you go back and you start looking at it. Do I have profit protection? Am I likely to get my money back? Is this worth the test? Is those type of items?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I can move through those that don't work, that aren't even close, really fast. I don't spend much time at all on them, because if it's on the 5th page of Google, the odds are it's not a good source anyway.
Someone, I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but this process that you're explaining, that you are doing in 20 seconds, open up the listing, you're evaluating the listing, you're looking at the Keepa chart, you're, searching Google for a source, and you're doing all this in a very short amount of time. It almost feels to me like the guy in the Matrix, right? The green things are coming down the screen and he can totally decode it on the fly. That must be what it feels like, or what it seems like to people who don't do what we do yet, or aren't as fluent as we are, where you're like reading the green screen.
Yeah. I still have 2 teenage daughters, although they've both been driving for a couple of years. But I was explaining to somebody the other day, if you've taught somebody to drive recently, for a while you're like, okay, left, center. Now watch this. And it's a lot of overcorrections, and they're working really hard to try to keep things, check your mirror and all those things. But after you've driven for several years and you watch somebody, their hand is moving minutely on the steering wheel, keeping it perfectly centered. They have no idea they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Their eyes have checked the mirrors. They have no idea they're doing it. It becomes automatic. And so after you look at enough asens, many of those things become automatic. And, sometimes you look at it with somebody will like, hey, look at this asen for me. What do you think? And you look at the screen and this, and this, and they're like, well, how'd you know to look there? And you think, it's sometimes it's almost, you have to really process through, what did I do? What are those steps I go through to try to write them down to help somebody go through them that you've just picked up over experience?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And you start doing these things subconsciously, and you don't even know you're doing them. Like, have you ever, like when you used to drive to work, you drive to work and don't even remember the drive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, same sort of thing. When you get really good at this, you just cruise right on through it. So you mentioned your teenage daughters. I think it was the conference in Columbus where I first heard about Mike Alte, and actually sat down and had lunch with your family one day. And you were off networking somewhere. And so I didn't get a chance to meet you. I kind of saw you from across the room, but Rob and Joy and I sat down and had lunch with your wife and daughters and son-in-law. I think, we just fell in love with your family that day. We were like, can we be adopted, please? Because it doesn't seem like you'll notice 2 more mouths to feed there.
Absolutely.
Anyway, what a great family. They're so welcoming and warm, and just we're happy to, just like you are. We know when you're talking with people, happy to share no matter what, right? It's just like, how can we help? And I just appreciate that so much. So please send my condolences to Kelly and the kids. Right. I think I see some of your maybe one of your olders on Facebook these days. But anyway, okay, cool. Well, I think at one point you mentioned that you kept a business journal.
Yeah.
Are you still doing that?
I am. And, even sitting for the conversation, there's opportunity if I need to take notes. I'm a very visual person. So that's one of the, I like multiple screens, but for my whole life, it's been one of those things. My wife will tell me something. I'm like, hold on, put it in the calendar. I got to write it down. Just the fact that you told me means nothing, if I haven't written it down. And so sometimes it's notes, but that business journal to say, what is it I need to accomplish? What are those main tasks I need to do tomorrow? And what did I get done for the day? Try and also even to record those small successes, and, even if it's just mentally, but celebrate the success. Okay, if we hit this goal, we hit that goal, we found X number of asens, I did what I needed to get done for today.
Yeah. I think that some people might look at Mike and say, what a meteoric rise that he, it looks like that, right? From the outside. There were struggles, right? I mean, just because you decided you were going to do it doesn't mean that it was going to happen. How long did it take you to get to, from ground zero to kind of where you thought, okay, I can maybe take a breath?
Yeah, I was looking back at the numbers that I'd pulled up for the conference. There's an element that I also want to say, I'm not sure I've taken a breath yet. I've been in this a couple of years, because I was starting to feel that way right before the bundling change. Like, all right, now I'm starting to pivot to wholesale. This is starting to go exactly where I wanted it to go. And even at that point, I thought, it's taken me a little longer to get here than I wanted to, but it's all right. I'm feeling comfortable that I'm at least on a path, and then you lost half of it and started over. And we have, it took us from, I told you February was a low point, but it took us several more months to kind of just get back to where we were at. And so, I've started back up with, there was a few wholesale accounts. I never let the wholesale accounts go. I just wasn't focusing on gaining more. But I'm spending a couple of days a week now focusing back on wholesale. And so we're back to kind of where we were. About the conference time frame is when I got back to kind of the numbers I was November of 24.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an element that says, I'm not sure I've put it on coast mode yet, but, starting to try to write down the SOPs and determine, okay, what is it exactly I want done? To have two VAs that help me that are working well, but I would like to outsource some more of that. Then I have to define what that is that I want done. And so starting to write those SOPs and define what is it that I need done is kind of where I'm at right now. So I talk to some people that say, I feel like I'm on coast. I just work 10 hours a week and that's it. I'm not there yet. So I'm still working hard.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, you at least did get to take a breath. Thinking about that wholesale journey, I'm curious, how much of that would you say your business is today, percentage wise?
It's probably 15% right now.
Okay.
So not a huge amount. It's just starting to grow.
Yeah.
So, I found a new wholesale distributor, placed kind of a sample order, even though everything looked good. I didn't want to buy everything that looked like it might be good. So we ordered probably 15 items from them and sent them in, some to Walmart, some to Amazon, and, just made sure that when people bought them, they were happy with them, and product that came in looked like it should, and all those types of things. And so this week we're placing, multiple more orders with that supplier.
Okay. Now, are you doing your own prep?
So one of my first, I'll say, largest wholesale distributor required a dock and a semi availability. Yep. So I go to a prep center there. So I have one prep center that I'm happy with, but we've been prepping everything else ourselves. And that's one of the things on the list, to outsource more of that.
Yeah.
To free up some time.
Yeah. Okay. Help me think through the wholesale. I'm going to set you up a little bit for this because 95% of the time when new people are coming into this business and we're trying to get them started in the arbitrage model, it gets hard. And then they're like, you know what? I think I want to do wholesale because they think wholesale is easier and it costs less. And there's, seems like there should be a lot of benefits to it. We do some wholesale as well. Although I say I'm not doing as much wholesale today because the majority of the wholesale we were doing was for our bundles, which we're not selling anymore. So I'm just curious, like, what do you tell a new seller? Because you're a coach, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. But what are you thinking, or what would you tell someone who's like, "Oh, wholesale's got to be easier than this"?
There's a lot of similarities. The challenge, excuse me, early on is finding a good asen, which being, everything matches. You have a source that makes money. All those types of items is really difficult early on. And it is really difficult to find a distributor that you can make a reasonable profit with. I remember one of the large grocery distributors, and I had an account. I looked at them once, and then they turned around and said, "Okay, if you can spend minimum of $2,000 twice a month with us, we'll give you, another tier of discounting. Can you do that?" Absolutely. If they got the products, I'm happy to spend the money. And so they sent me the new list, and it was significantly, you had your retail price, here's their normal price, there's like 25% off of that price. And, they've got like 80,000 SKUs. And so you start analyzing all the SKUs and looking through it, and you're like, even at those discounts, there's very little on here that I can order and make even a 20% return, let alone trying to make a 30% or more. And so there's just a lot of those, like getting an account means almost nothing because there's so many accounts that are not profitable or you don't have the buying power. There was one brand that I got a wholesale account with, but I mean, it was 20% loss to buy at wholesale and try to send it in. And then I found, that one brand on a couple of other distributors list, because they have the buying power, it's a whole lot less with them. And it was, at that time, it was cheaper to go to the local grocery store than it was to buy wholesale direct from the brand. And so in the wholesale course with Carl Jacoby, he does a great job. That it was one of the numbers he said was, you'll spend a lot of hours and time trying to get a single wholesale account. because it's a lot about relationships and building relationships and multiple follow-ups. And so you'll find that 1 out of 40 accounts that you go for will you get. Well, okay, I can, if I apply for X number a day, then he goes, and then out of the 40 accounts you get, 1 out of 40 accounts you do receive actually might be profitable.
Yeah.
And so there's, finding a good distributor or wholesaler or brand is much like trying to find a good ASIN. It's a whole lot more work than most people think it would be.
Yeah. The learning curve on it is just as much as when you're starting out trying to figure out how to do arbitrage.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I kind of teased the idea or the news. It's not news, but you're a coach with the Jim Cockrum coaching team. In fact, as of recently, you're a coach on our team.
That's right.
We were super stoked about that. In fact, when you first came into the coaching program, I was like, we need to get Mike. But somebody else already had dibs. But there were some changes, and we're just super excited to have you on the team. Let's kind of switch gears now and maybe put your coach's hat on as we talk about a few other things, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
If you had to pick a couple of numbers to watch every week, just to kind of gauge the success or the stability of your business, what would they be?
Really, the one of them is whether you're brand new or been at it for a while. One of them would be the number of test ASINs you're sending in. We would love for an ASIN to last forever. My wife, one time we were looking at something, and I don't remember what ASIN we lost at the time. She's like, "Do we have any of these that have been around for 6 months?" And so I went and looked. We actually have our longest ASIN right now that we still currently sell is November of 23.
Okay.
And we still have one.
Yeah.
But there's many of them that last a few months. So you always have to keep feeding the beast and keep looking for new opportunities. And so, and when you talk to where they've been in the business for 5 years and they're a multi-million-dollar seller or brand new, that's probably one of the biggest items is, what do you have in place to keep working on finding new opportunities?
Yeah. I had a great question. Let me see if I talk long enough, it'll come back to me. Back in the day. Okay. So when I first started in this business, the going rate of decay on your replens list was about 5% a month. That's certainly increased for us over the years, because the reason back then that ASINs would decay is usually because of competition. And today there's more than just competition that contributes to the decay factor, right?
Right.
Brands gating people. So you could have sold something for the last 6 months that now you're not approved to sell anymore. The ASIN getting removed from the catalog because it was created incorrectly. How many of those are we getting these days? The whole bundle situation, multi-pack problem. What sort of rate of decay are you seeing on your book of business these days?
I have not measured it in quite a while, so I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah.
It's significantly more than when I first started. I've been doing this since 23.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, if you had one that, once it met the replenishable item list, it was on there for quite a while. And now they are definitely bouncing off for one reason or the other much faster.
Turning over a little faster these days. Yeah. But once you get the process down, like you were talking about, once you can read the matrix screen, then it's just a matter of find more ASINs, right?
Right. Still always a challenge, but it is easier than it used to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the catalog keeps growing, so there's more, there's new opportunity out there all the time. So what is one cash mistake that you see new sellers make that kind of hurts them early on?
So one of them, they're I guess, desperate to get big quickly, and will be spending money on ASINs that don't meet all their criteria. And then they spend all their money and can't figure out why it doesn't sell. And, you talk to a person, well, let's look at the catalog. Okay, pull open that one. Let's look at it. And, I had 1.3 drops. And there's not a single drop in the last, 30 days.
Uh-huh.
But if it sold for that price, it would be really good. If it sold, you're right. So it's either being hesitant to test it, and so not making a decision, or just going all in and buying everything they ever see, hoping something works, and not following the process.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things you talk about is like taking your capital and spreading it out over 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's so important for new sellers?
It's starting to build the mindset, because I think everyone early on underestimates how hard it is to find good testable ASINs. Eventually you get to where you have, a number of them to pick from, but they want to spend everything they have in week one so they can get it back and start growing instantly, and say, no, it's going to take a while. But also, you send it in, and it takes 1 to 4 weeks for Amazon to get it in inventory ready to sell. And then it's going to take, best case, a couple weeks to sell it. If it doesn't work, it might take, 6, 8 weeks to get ready to sell it. Then Amazon holds your money for 2 weeks and pays you your first payment. They hold half of it for another 2 weeks. So there's a time frame in there to start getting money back.
Yeah.
It is always much longer than it feels like it should be. And so to take your money and spread it out. So, for me, that 10-week window, you're starting to get your first sales that did work, money back in, and starting to kind of refund that seed money you have there available.
It's such a great point. I feel like even though it can be 10 weeks before you really start getting the feedback that you're looking for, that is still way faster, much, much faster than a lot of other traditional businesses, right?
Absolutely.
It's not like it was 6 or 7 years ago where, I could spend money on Saturday and start, and get sales on Friday. And, half of those, dollars would be available to me within a fairly short amount of time. But it's not as bad as you got to do this for 2 years before you get into the black either, right?
Right.
So 10 weeks, that's a good time frame. I think historically we've told people like 6 to 8, but I think you're right. Especially there's so many more, it seems like, events going on these days, whether it's Q4 or Christmas in July with Prime Days or whatever, that it takes a little longer for your inventory to go through the system, and maybe longer and longer every year. But still, all things considered, it's a pretty short window.
Right. Compared to any other business you could do, it's incredibly short with good feedback.
Yeah. So obviously, when you come into the coaching program, I'm going to say your business gets evaluated, right? The coaching team and Jim, they do a once over on you, right, and make sure like you're not faking it. So you've built some traction. You got a good business. You're feeding your family now. You haven't had to go back to work in a couple of years.
Right.
What's the turbo button for when you're working with a brand new seller? Like we've talked about all the delays that can exist, but what are you doing to help these new sellers get some wins early on?
Some of the things with helping you get ungated and utilizing you can do it manually, but with look at a list of asens from new sellers, and you got similar storefront stalking, but if you combine that with the 3P to look at and say, okay, here's the ones that are just hard gated, they're restricted, throw those out. Now go through this list of asens, and we're just looking for brands that you're ungated in. And you can start to look at it by the categories they're ungated in, but starting with a seed list of brands, and helps them get a starting point to say, okay, at least now I can start sourcing for this list of brands or the ones that I'm ungated in.
Yeah.
And so that helps them get down the path of going, and then really just kind of reinforcing of here's the basics you've got to go through on every ASIN and make sure the pre-flight check, as you guys teach, matches, and all those items, that this is a good listing and you have a viable source.
Yep. You mentioned the pre-flight check, and you kind of touched on the sales velocity. And there was a couple of podcasts over the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure if I know you're busy, but with the recent sales rank change, that the drops are a little less important now and more focusing on the sold in the last 30 days or sold last month. How have you been integrating that? And did you notice it?
I did. And, it was, I have never looked at I haven't really paid much attention to the BSR number type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in generalities, I know, it's over 200,000, not really interested. Oh, it's at 50. I'm going to look at this one hard type of thing. If for whatever reason I see that BSR number, but you look at it and you think that number, the chart looks pretty good. It's moving, and seller count was moving, but the drops just aren't there. I'd love it to be 30. It's 20. I'm testing type of thing. So I noticed it, but I did not really realize they had changed the algorithm behind it until talking to you. And so, yeah, I did notice it, but I just kept working on testing and checking everything else to make sure it worked. But in general, the first test, if you see a yellow line, I'm happy. 50 a month works for me.
Yeah.
And if it's more than that, that's great. But first thing I'm looking for is a yellow line.
Okay. Yeah, same thing now. And it's just helpful that it's on a lot more ASINs these days than it used to be. So I know as a coach, and even as a student, I know that you got coaching, but as part of coaching, you get lifetime access to the Proven Amazon course.
Right.
Right. And there is a ton of information in the Proven Amazon course that
Right.
you could get overwhelmed with, and a lot of people do. What are you saying to someone who feels buried by everything that's in there?
If they are brand spanking new and don't have an account, it's, start at the 101, get your account set up. And the Kickstart program is phenomenal for that if you are just really brand spanking new. But then the two courses, Replens 2.0, the first kind of four major sections of that, tell everybody you need to go through it at least once, if not twice, and then keep a 360
Yeah.
are the two main courses I point everybody to. And it's so I listen to them twice and they kind of roll their eyes a little bit, but it's most of us need some soak time. You listen to it once when you don't know what you're doing and you
Yeah.
pick up a few tips. But once you've looked at it, 100 asens and then 1,000 asens and 10,000 asens, and you listen to what they're saying again, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's what they were saying before that I never caught the first time.
This reminds me of like when I'm book reading,
Yeah,
right? I read a book, I'm like, oh, that was an awesome book. And then a year later, I'll read it again and get something completely different out of it than I
right.
did the first time. And maybe a whole year doesn't go by, but sometimes revisiting them, you just have a different perspective. Things land with you differently when you have experience.
Right.
Well, I have some rapid fire questions I want to pepper
Okay.
you with, but before we go there, just give me an idea like where do you see this going for you and your business and your family, Mike? Just to say, I think you're an upstanding member of the community, very inspiring, and as I mentioned at the top of the show, highly relatable. I think based on what I know of you, you can do whatever you want to do. Well, where do you think this is going for you?
It's at one point I thought the kids would jump on board possibly. My oldest daughter helps a lot with the business, but has no real interest to be I'll say a large paid member of the business. She has
Mhm.
two small kids right now. And so, her comment was, Dad, if you were paying me and gave me a job description, I'd feel really responsible to show up every day. And right now I show up when I want to and I work when I want to. And if I want to take a day off, I can. And so she's paid in, babysitting and other things. So
Uh-huh.
but so I kind of early on I thought the kids would jump in, but now it's more of it's still a family business because she helps and my mom helps with packing and things like that. And Kelly, now that our youngest graduated through, she's helping a lot more with the business, and so it's still a family business in a lot of ways. But we've talked a lot about, all right, as we take this, do we outsource everything from a pack and prep standpoint, because that's one avenue, or do we set up differently and okay, now we're going to get serious about pack and prep and look at that as I don't know that I really want to do a lot for other people, but more of a business for myself. Because right now we're doing it all out of our basement. So every product comes in and is carried down the stairs and is prepped and packed, and every box is carried back up the stairs.
Yeah.
So there's a fair amount of time, moving that stuff around. And so, that's a kind of a decision that's down the road a little bit. Right now, I'm working on outsourcing it. But I could also see coming in a year or two, you look at how much you're paying for outsourcing and say, is that what you want to bring that back in and free up some of that money for investment?
Yeah. Okay. Well, you mentioned it's family business. This I think is a change from your, previous
Right.
career corporate job. How's your life been enriched since you were able to do this versus, doing the grind, the 8 to 5 grind?
It's been good because I've always loved kids. I
Yeah.
always knew I'd love my grandkids because I didn't have them before the business. But I have loved because my daughter comes over on average 4 days a week, at least 3 days a week, and helps pack and prep for a while.
Yeah.
And her and I worked really well. And before kids, and while she's just pregnant, there's definitely good synergy. We made 1 plus 1 was more than two.
Mhm.
Um, and then I went to while I would pack and prep with my grandson strapped to the front of me and a baby carrier and take him on a walk around the block when it was time for a nap to get him to sleep and then back to work. And so I would not have had those opportunities to know my grandkids like I do now if I was in a corporate job.
Yeah.
And I've never even had a 9 to 5 corporate job. 30 years, and the a 50-hour week was kind of my easy week, was kind of the where I was at. And there was weeks that were much more than that. So being able to do that with family around, my mom comes and helps 1 to 3 days a week, depending on what we need. And so getting to spend time with her, my dad had a health episode a while last year. And so I spent a week at the hospital with him. That was far easier to do with this business than it was in the corporate world. And
Yeah.
so, it's much more time around the family, which has been good. And you can't put a price on being around the grandkids and seeing them grow up. type of thing. And so those were wonderful things. Right before the conference, I had the second grandchild was in NICU, and so I was taking my turns in NICU, being with her. That again was just not as easy to do when you're in a corporate America.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it there. All that is awesome. I'm sure you've told me before, and I can't remember, what was your corporate job?
If I look, so degree wise, I have an engineering degree and then MBA. And so I spent roughly 15 years as an automotive supplier, tier one, and started off as an engineer, but fairly quickly went into management, plant manager, and then various roles from engineering to business analysis at corporate. And then I went into a Caterpillar dealer and was over the service organization. So kind of over all the service locations in the state and a couple hundred technicians that worked on the equipment, and was kind of the corporate America job.
So you didn't come into this business with a bunch of tech skills or advanced like retail buyer or anything like that.
So
yeah. Started from ground zero, and you can still do it. How long did it take you to sort of replace your normal paycheck the first time?
Well, the easier answer is we always tried to live well within our means.
Okay.
And so, to hit what's the base budget we have to hit was probably 18 months for us easily. Yeah. But, we're still not where we were at from replacing where I was at corporate. We're still not there.
Okay.
But, we were at where we can pay our bills and do what we want to do. So,
yep. Okay. Great. Thanks for being so vulnerable and open with those questions.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
Sure.
All right. Here we go. What's one tool that you can't live without? Keep it doesn't count.
I would say overall proven Amazon course. Okay. It's got a lot of answers in there that you can go through and search for. And, you can, coaching is wonderful and great, and it helps a lot of people, but you can go a long way with proven Amazon course.
Okay, great. What's your go-to snack on those long RA trips?
I drink a lot of water. I don't need a lot of snacks on the RA trips. So
okay, so just staying hydrated.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Last one. What's one thing about Amazon, selling on Amazon, that still surprises you?
One of them would be probably some of the other sellers. You come in and you had a product that I was selling for $75 and pretty routinely, and I was on it for 6 to 9 months, and then a new seller comes on and prices it at $50. The only person at $50. Everybody else is $75.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think, oh, they're going to sell out and learn. No, that was 4 months ago, and they're still at $50. So, just some of those other new, I assume they're new sellers. You look at ratings or whatever else, and you're thinking, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So,
right.
But just having to react to some of the, the sellers and the changes that come through.
Okay, great. Well, Mike, I have gotten through, I think we covered a lot of ground today, but is there anything specifically that you want to bring up?
No, I would say, you ask about key tools. The other one would be probably 3P Mercury. Is you need a good calculator, and 3P Mercury does, whether you're just looking for a calculator, but the ability to store your leads and go back through them with Keepa updates and look at them over time has been a real lifesaver. So that would be the other one. The one tool I would not want to live without. And so at this point, I could probably live without the proven Amazon course if I had to. I've got contacts and people I can call when I want to ask a question, but I would not want to do without 3P Mercury.
I'm glad you called that out, because you mentioned it earlier, and I was going to take a minute to chat about it, but then we got sidetracked on something else. So yeah, 3P Mercury is this program born in this community, right?
Right.
And the power of that, just as a database to store all your viable asens, can make your sourcing so much easier.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that tool as well. Okay, and it's I don't know what the link is for that. I'm going to let Jim and team put the link in the notes for that, because I think it might be silentjimdotcom/the system, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay. So go check that out. 3P Mercury, yeah, it's definitely a game changer. Actually, it was with that, pair the power of that tool with the bulk, sort of retail recon and other methods that are out there to get a bunch of bulk asens. With 3P Mercury is where the magic really started to happen. And so Kang and the developers of that tool, they're really been a lifesaver. And I think it's making it, as all the challenges that we talk about, Mike, in terms of the whole selling on Amazon challenges, They're going to be those challenges no matter what business you go in. One of the things that that has made it easier for us and for newer sellers today are these tools.
Right. You
Okay,
talk to a
awesome.
few extraordinarily large people, and they've built really good systems, but they keep them for themselves, basically.
Yes, yeah, usually,
And
yeah.
Kang has given away what built his success, but then he's not only done that, not given it away, but
Yeah,
he has actually built upon it and it's became much better than even what built his business up. And so
yeah,
it's just been a really incredible tool.
yeah. All right. Well, if you don't have anything else, I think we can wrap it up here. Are you good?
All right, great talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciate you coming on the show. And I just want to say, what did you have to do, Mike, when you lost 50% of your revenue because bundles went away?
Keep calm and test more asens.
You had to keep calm and test more asens. Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Mike.
All right,
take care, everybody.
Brian.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for joining us for today's episode. But before you go, I got a couple special minutes for you. Let's spend some time with my good friend, Jeff Shik of jeffshik.com. Over the years, he's handed us so many great tips and insights to help protect our e-commerce, Amazon, Walmart accounts from legal and policy violations. What are you seeing lately, Jeff? What new tip do you have for us today?
So what I wanted to talk about today is about the idea behind acknowledging violations. So one of my clients had a conversation with me last week, and they mentioned that they had a perfect account health score. And I was like, that's great. Like, you looked at their dashboard and it was zeros all the way down. And we were just talking it through, and they said, yeah, I just acknowledge violations when they come in. And, if I can't fight it on an appeal, I acknowledge it. So that way I get it off my account. And it was an interesting conversation because that was what they thought that was going on. But with our experience with other sellers and, especially dealing with Amazon's attorneys, we actually see that there's a whole other side of Amazon that the sellers don't see that's beyond the seller central dashboard. And so what I mean by that is that, when you make an acknowledgement on Amazon, the gist of what you're clicking is you're clicking a button that says, I understand and acknowledge the violation and have taken steps to remedy it. It's roughly along that wording. And so it seems harmless enough. The problem is that Amazon views that as an admission of wrongdoing. And so while they're willing to give you a second chance, just like, you show up in high school, you show up 10 minutes late and the teacher, marks you as tardy, but then lets you still come to class. It's kind of the same principle. Amazon lets you, mark yourself as understanding the violation and keep selling, but that doesn't go away. And so, it becomes really dangerous later down the line, depending on what you're actually acknowledging. So like, for instance, an example of that is we had a seller acknowledge a counterfeit claim recently. Well, they were accused of selling counterfeit products that they had purchased directly from the brand. Obviously, if they're brand direct and not through any wholesale companies or third parties, it was, directly from the brand's, brand.com website. And so the seller was, clicked acknowledge anyways, because they wanted to get it off their account. And Amazon hadn't been accepting their order confirmations. So the problem with that is that even though it seems like a harmless acknowledgement, they've now acknowledged to Amazon by clicking the box. They've said, I understand the counterfeit policy and acknowledge the violation, meaning I agree that I sold a counterfeit item, even though that's not the case.
Right.
And so we've seen this surface, unfortunately, a few times now, where Amazon legal, the seller might get suspended for something else. Like maybe they're suspended for order defect rates. And then Amazon legal comes back and says, after a holistic review of your client's accounts, here's all the times they acknowledge selling, for instance, we'll just use this example. Here's all the times they acknowledge selling counterfeit products. So, and we saw this in one of the cases, they said, even though you are correct, the seller did not violate our, let's make up the example, order defect rate policy. Is obviously something else, but attorney-client privilege. They said even though the seller didn't violate this order defect rate policy because they've acknowledged selling counterfeit items in the past, we don't feel comfortable continuing this business relationship because they seem to have a problem with sourcing inauthentic items. And this is a seller who'd always bought everything from the brand, but just wanted to have that perfect account health dashboard, and so they kept acknowledging the violations when Amazon wouldn't accept their appeals.
Right. Right. So if you just acknowledge it and say, yep, I'm guilty, even when you know you're not, and you probably should fight it, that could come back to burn you at some point, is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. It can come back to burn you big time. And so even like in cases where, for instance, a seller gets an IP complaint and we have been fighting it. The brand won't take it off. Amazon won't accept the seller appeals. A lot of times sellers will then come to me and say, well, can I acknowledge it? And I'll say no, because you didn't sell a counterfeit item. You don't want to acknowledge this and put this on your record, telling them that you did something you didn't do, because it could have further implications down the line. Yes. Because items drop off the visible dashboard after 6 months, but an acknowledgement stays on your Amazon account indefinitely for Amazon's attorneys to see. So it's so it's just one of those things. It's like it's better to let it ride it out than to admit to doing something you didn't do.
And in all cases, that's something I would run past you and your team and get your advice. That's the reason we keep you guys on retainer, just a few dollars a month. jeffshik.com. Yeah, before you click any acknowledgments or admit something just to make it go away, you need to run it past Jeff and his team. And that's a great insight today, because you do see some pretty bad advice floating around the e-commerce forums and Amazon groups. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, just acknowledge it. It goes away and it'll vanish from your dashboard. End of problem. Well, no.
And even account health associates, if you call account health, they will do it too, because guess what? On their metrics, they're graded on, how effectively they're helping sellers. And having someone acknowledge something is just as effective as having them appeal something successfully.
Yes.
So, that's always a big piece of advice. We always tell people, trust but verify, trust but verify.
Yep.
So Amazon seller support can get, account health support or seller support, whichever team you want to talk to. Yeah. They can give you decent advice sometimes, but always verified, because unfortunately there is a lot of times that they give bad advice, and sellers are responsible for having read the policy themselves. So you could literally read the Amazon policy on, late shipment rates, for instance, and read that it says, after X% you'll be suspended, and then call seller support and account health support and ask them, to explain the policy to you. And if they do, and they explain it to you wrong, that's on you for listening to their explanation. Unfortunately, Amazon's not going to give any deference. Even if you have a recorded phone call, they're not going to come back and say, well, you listened to us, but, so we're sorry. Yeah. They'll come back and say, well, you should have done your own research to verify it. If you,
I'm sure it's in their terms of service somewhere. Even if we give you bad advice, you're responsible for your own actions.
Actually, believe it or not, they actually do have that paragraph. It says, nothing in this should be considered legal or compliance advice. And we encourage sellers to work with outside consultants and attorneys to ensure compliance with our policies.
So that's Amazon itself saying every seller needs to go hire jeffshik.com and put him on retainer.
If they would just go ahead and put my logo there while they're at it, it'd make life so much simpler.
Save everyone some time, man. Just send them right to the best. I love it. You. That is really good stuff. Even if it kind of reminds me of calling the IRS and, you say, I'm having trouble on this line of my tax form, and they give you really bad advice. That agent's not the one that's responsible. You are. No. Same thing here. Just because you finally got an agent to say what you were hoping to hear doesn't mean it's the best advice. You need a pro in your corner.
It's interesting you say that. Back in the day, before Amazon collected the sales tax, Arizona used to have a policy that if you called them or emailed them, they would, and they told you that you weren't responsible for the sales tax, that you actually were still responsible. But if you knew the proper channels to go through, and you had a tax, either a tax attorney or an accountant reach out to the Arizona Department of Revenue and do what's called an official letter ruling, they would write you the exact same email, but they'd stamp it with an official letter number, and then you wouldn't be responsible for the tax. So it just goes to show, it's, the phone calls and the emails are great, but if it's not the right channel, it doesn't carry any weight. So.
Yeah. Well, all I just heard you say is I'm sending all that to Jeff and his team when it comes up, because I don't want to have to worry about it. As so many of us in our community do, man.
So, we appreciate
you very much, man. And a great sponsor of this show. For those who haven't heard of Jeff before, get over to jeffshik.com, spelled just like the razor. Put his team on retainer for a few dollars per month. And Amazon, Walmart, e-commerce rules, laws, regulations. Man, these guys are good. They're so good at what they do. And I just appreciate you, Jeff. We're going to do this again next week, right?
Awesome. We will. Thank you.
Talk to you then.
Okay.